This episode is brought to you by Snapple. Want to know another Snapple fact? The first hot air balloon passengers were a sheep, a duck, and a rooster. Ridiculous. Check out Snapple.com to find ridiculously flavored Snapple near you.
The Flushing Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
Welcome back to another episode of Oh, Mr. Sheffield, the podcast about nanny, starring your buddy, Fran Drescher. This is Shawn Pasquale sing-songing his way into this intro. My co-host,
Toria Sheffield. I'm so tired and out of it this morning that while you were singing, I was swaying to the music. Oh God, this is gonna be an interesting one. I feel like. I was sort of just like bossa nova beating it alone, like.
Wow. All right. Welcome, everybody. Episode 4, Season 2 of The Nanny. This episode, we are discussing Episode 4, Season 2 of The Nanny. This one is called Material Fran, which I guess is supposed to be a play on Madonna's Material Girl.
Which is appropriate because this is the episode where Fran gets courted by a much older, extremely wealthy man.
This episode was written by Eileen O'Hare, and it was directed by our old friend Lee Shalette Shamel.
But what I really liked about this episode is you are reminded that, while Fran isn't just from a different culture, she's from a different class. And from a class where sometimes, quote unquote, marrying up is like someone's life plan. And we kind of delve into that and that culture a little bit, which I'm always fascinated by. Like, I'm fascinated by this in real life as well. But so I thought this was an interesting episode with some cool dynamics happening.
And it in keeping with a recurring theme on this show, it justified its existence in the larger story by giving us two really nice reminders that, like, Fran and Mr. Sheffield are meant to be together forever, and that they are truly destined to be together. We get two really nice beats where we sort of see them kind of vocalize exactly what they want in a partner while the other person is doing exactly what they're saying.
Yes.
And it just sort of further solidifies that, like, these two are made for each other.
It had a lot of synchronicity with something that happened in season 1 as well, which I really liked.
So first up, we get the cold open, which sets up the Gracie plotline, right? Gracie comes in to the kitchen. She's nervous. She's got this teddy bear. She's like really upset. Oh, I don't want to part with him, but I'm going to this sleepover and I'm worried that I'm going to get made fun of by the other girls. And then I think the next thing that gets set up is this B plot, which is Maggie wants to go to a concert and wants Fran's help to get backstage passes and tickets and the whole thing, like, through Mr. Sheffield, but, like, doesn't want to ask him directly. And I got my first laugh of the episode, which was Fran doesn't know who the Stone Temple Pilots are, which was shocking to me.
I didn't know who they were. I thought they were made up.
You don't know who the Stone Temple Pilots are?
No, I literally thought, they must have made up a funny rock and roll band name.
Now I'm playing Stone Temple Pilots under this.
Who are they?
Who are the Stone Temple Pilots?
I don't.
Toria.
I don't know. You shaming me is not going to make me know.
I feel like this is where our very, not very large age difference, I guess, comes into play. I mean,
it's well known that we're 17 years apart. So
they were a very big grunge 90s band. Core was like their first album. They had a song on the Crows soundtrack, which is one of my favorite songs on that soundtrack. Driving faster in my car.
I watched this episode twice. I thought to myself,
Love Song, Plush, none of these things.
No. I literally, when I was watching this episode, thought, it must be a fun job to make up fake rock band names, that would sound like young people would listen to them. That's truly what I thought this was. But also, you have to remember, I would have been 6 years old at the time. I also always say this, music is not my area of expertise in any way.
Yeah. Well, Stone Temple Pilots, if you don't know them, kids, look them up. Or don't. But if you're going to, look up The Big Empty. I'm playing it right now throughout this whole conversation.
Over my voice.
Underneath. Yeah, I've muted Toria's entire track line. You guys have just been listening to Stone Temple Pilots.
So Maggie's trying to get tickets to this concert, but we really get into the episode when we find out that Cece is in the living room hosting a ladies' luncheonette. Like, it's a fundraising luncheonette where she's trying to convince all these women to donate money to, their new production. And it's all these high society women. And there's this great moment where Fran comes running in because she's chasing Brighton and Gracie. Like, Brighton has taken Gracie's bear and they're running around as kids do. She comes running in screaming, and then she instantly stops when she realizes there's this like very important gathering happening, and she kind of like quickly recenters and she's like, how do you do? How do you do? And that
excuse me, pardon me, fake Chanel.
Yeah, under her breath she goes, fake Chanel.
Yeah.
But so then she sees this woman who is like a very elegant redheaded woman, and her I know where you're going with this. But she sees this woman and her eyes widen and she's like, oh my God, Kathy Mary O'Malley? It's me, Fran Fine. And this woman is like, oh, I'm sorry, you must be mistaken. And she's like, no, from such and such Flushing's High. And then she goes, oh, and they did a great job with your teeth. Your chin comes out now. At which point, Cece literally...
And then she goes, oh, and you finally got yourself a pair of... And then Cece turns around and she's like, no!
Yeah, no, literally she goes, you finally got yourself a pair of... And she's supposed to say breasts. And then Cece's hand just covers Fran's mouth, and she, in this really funny physical comedy moment, drags Fran away. Yes. And I actually had this note where I'm like, oh, this is the first time I could actually see a Fran Cece spinoff. Like, I loved their dynamic in this scene. So Cece has her hand over Fran's mouth, and she's like, that is Catherine Porter of the Park Avenue Porters. Now, if I let you go, will you go away? And Fran like nods with her mouth and nose still covered. And then the second Cece releases her.
Cece says, if I let you breathe, will you go away?
Oh, yes. So Fran nods, and then, but no sooner does Cece remove her hand from Fran's mouth, does Fran turn back towards Kathy and go, I hope those are sailing, because Cece yanks her out of the room. And I was like, oh, I could see a very funny odd couple show between these two. Like, I could see more of this.
Yeah, but as you said that, I was like, how would that work? And my only thought was like, Mr. Sheffield's dead. Fran is in charge of like their like estate, and like Cece is in charge of his company, and now they're stuck living and working together. And I was like, oh, that just sounds sad.
Or he just promotes Fran to, something in his business eventually.
Oh, he retires and he puts Fran in charge of the production company, and now it's her and Cece running things.
Something. Or I don't know.
Would be so mad.
I was going to say, this is where I thought you were going, and maybe you weren't going here. Did you recognize the woman who played Kathy?
I have a whole list.
I knew you would.
Judith Hogue, who played April O'Neil. She was the voice of April O'Neil in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Well, but she was also the actress.
The actress in the movie, I mean. Yeah, she was the actress who played April O'Neil in the 90s Ninja Turtles movie.
Was it 89 or 91? It was 91, right?
I think it was 91. Yeah.
Okay. That movie made such an impact on me as a child that I only knew the word teenage from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like, I knew what that was before I knew what a teenager was. So when I had a nanny who told me I would become a teenager one day, I thought that meant I was going to become a turtle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't become a turtle.
How long did you think that before you realized you're never going to become a turtle?
I remember, it was a whole conversation where I'm like, what do you mean teenager? Like, I was like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle? And she was like, yeah, you're going to be a teenager one day. And I was like, what? I could not comprehend. And then she was like, no, she realized that I misunderstood and thought that and she explained it.
We have a lot of younger listeners too. So we should also probably say, this actress you might also recognize, she played Gwen Cromwell Piper in Halloween Town.
Oh, yeah.
All of them, all the movies. So she plays Kathy, Fran and Val's high school buddy, who now has like married up in the world. She's like a socialite. She got a bunch of work done.
But the great moment is, so it's like she pretends she doesn't know Fran at the luncheonette. So then, Fran is pushed back into the kitchen, and right around that moment, Val shows up, and Val's like, "Are the leftovers ready?" Because Fran has clearly been like, "Val, there's going to be a party at the house. Come over and eat the leftovers with me." And they instantly sit down with these plates of food, and Fran's like, "You're never going to guess who I saw out there, Kathy O'Malley. She's had all this work done, blah blah blah." At which point, Kathy, or Catherine Porter, walks in and in this very formal way goes, "Excuse me, could you direct me to the powder room?" And you're like, "Oh, okay, so she's clearly going to keep this up." And then she goes, "Because I'm dying for a smoke." And she you realize she's just been code switching. And this actress did a great job. And she nails this character, and it reminded me how much the woman who was playing the fake Fran didn't really embody this Flushing vibe. She sort of seemed like she was pretending, whereas Judith Hoag she was great. And they all get so giddy, and they sit down, and they're all picking at food together, and it's revealed that yes, she's like, "I married up," and she's like, "Franny, my husband's business partner is hugely wealthy. You have to meet him." And it's also revealed that we get some nice little Val context and backstory in this scene, because Kathy's like, so excited to see Fran. And then Fran's like, "You remember Val?" And she's like, "Not ringing any bells." And Fran's basically like, "Remember when we used to go to the water park? She'd stand in the parking lot. She'd get up early and stand in the parking space until we got there." Yeah.
So Val is like this kind of loser who seems like a tag-along loser who would wake up at 6 a.m., go to where they were going to be later in the day, and then just stand in a parking space to save it until they showed up.
And then Val goes, "Those were the days."
Yeah.
But so anyway, so Kathy introduces this idea of let me introduce you to my husband's very wealthy business partner. And Fran at first is like, "Oh, I could never date anybody just for money." But Kathy's like, "You're being very prejudiced. He has a private jet, 2 Ferraris, and some private island or something." And then Fran's like, "You're right. I'm being very close-minded." So she's convinced.
Fran decides she's okay. I'm going to go on a date with this guy.
I'm going to go on a date because he's rich.
She comes downstairs for this date. She's wearing this very, very nice red dress, right? She looks great. But here's my question for you.
Well, okay, I will say debatable.
You know she looks good?
I agreed with Cece, but I will say this to anyone who doesn't remember.
Trampy? Is that what you're saying?
I feel like you're putting me in an uncomfortable position as a woman in 2021.
Fran Dresser for just having the confidence to wear a really pretty small red dress?
It was I think it was a bit of a tacky choice.
Wow.
But it was very Fran, and I love that Fran Drescher wore it. It was very Fran.
Well, what I was going to ask is, would that dress have looked better without the black stockings? It would, right? And I feel like no one would wear it like that now. They would just wear the dress, not the stockings.
But it was like a sequenced red mini dress, and I think that is kind of a winter look. So I would imagine, and it would be kind of hot. So I can't really imagine wearing that in summer, to be honest.
I see what you're saying. So she comes down in this red dress. There's a great line there, which I'll save until we get to our favorite lines. But there's a great CC Niles exchange there, and then we meet her date, Theo, who is played by this dude named Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. And he is notable because he was the voice of Alfred on Batman the Animated Series.
Well, also, I think he was notable because he was in some very, very big movies in his time. The one that I've seen is Wait Until Dark with Audrey Hepburn, which is a very, very famous horror movie, basically, or thriller that holds up as a very scary concept. It's a blind woman is experiencing a home invasion by 2 men trying to rob her home and think she's an easy target. And when she realizes this is happening, the only advantage she has is that she breaks all the light bulbs in the house because she knows how to navigate space in the dark, and they don't.
This movie is based on a play, which is really cool because the whole second act of the play is done basically in the dark. except for the light from the inside the refrigerators, the only light on stage. And I saw this play on Broadway when there was a revival. This was in probably like the early 2000s, starring Marissa Tomei and Quentin Tarantino as the lead guy who's there to kill her.
What?
Yep. And I stayed after, and I still to this day have the playbill signed by Marissa Tomei and Quentin Tarantino.
Well, I wish Quentin Tarantino had played the older
old man.
Yeah. But yeah, so this but I wanted to quickly say before we even get into this, the reason that Shawn and I got into a debate over the dress is because Fran is in this cute sequence mini dress, and Cece goes, "Oh, you're not wearing that tacky dress to go out with Catherine Porter's business, like Mr. Porter's business partner." She goes, "I wouldn't be caught dead in that dress." and Niles goes, "You'd have to be dead 6 months to fit into it."
Yeah.
But anyway, so then he shows up and he's old. He's probably like 40 years older than Fran.
Listen, he was the voice of Alfred on Batman. He's old.
He's very old.
Very old.
But he's very sweet. He brings her both flowers and chocolates because he said he couldn't decide, which I thought I was charmed when I was. So,
and how you're slut shaming Fran.
I said charmed, not because
this rich old man, because he brought candies and chocolate and flowers.
Not because he's wealthy, but because it was sweet. It was sweet.
So Fran ends up dating this guy. At first, she like comes in. She's like from the date the next morning. We get a famous nanny breakfast table scene. She comes in wearing a tiara, like a diamond tiara, and I think he's bought her earrings and like a diamond necklace. I mean, they went on one date, and he's like really, really, really laying it on thick.
Oh, and there's flowers all over the breakfast, all over the dining room. Like, and she, she's singing with joy.
Which, to be fair, when you're that old, you gotta move fast,
Yes.
I mean, he doesn't have time for like a 2-year courtship. It's like, let's go. Hey, here's all my money. What do you want?
Yes. And he moves so fast that he arrives at breakfast that morning and interrupts their breakfast and is like, Fran, would you like to fly to Paris with me today? Yeah. And she says yes. And this is sort of to the surprise of the whole family. Like, they at first think she's going to walk into breakfast embarrassed because she had no idea she was going to be going on a date with somebody so old. But she's downright giddy and she's loving it so far. So this gets them into the next scene, which is it's Fran, Kathy, Theo, who is Fran's suitor, and Mr. Porter. The four of them on a private jet. It's this, a lot of physical comedy with Fran trying to drink champagne and eat lobster during turbulence, very Lucille Ball-esque in that way. But this might have been the most interesting scene to me in the whole episode because, again, this is what I'm fascinated by. The dynamic between these older men and these younger women, and how these women to sort of have this lifestyle allow themselves to be infantilized by these older men. Because literally, at one point, first of all, it's made clear that Fran's not going to spend any time with Theo for the whole time they're in Paris because he's going to be working the whole time. He's just basically going to give her a credit card and send her off.
She's arm candy. I mean, she's
arm candy. Well, but the thing is, so Fran is, disappointed. She's like, oh, so we're not going to get to know each other at all on this trip. And then literally, no sooner does she say that, does Mr. Porter look at Kathy and go, Kathy, baby, do you want to sit on daddy's lap? Yeah. Which is so gross. And then Fran kind of out of the side of her mouth goes, is he going to burp you too? And Kathy goes, if he wants to. And she sort of stands up and sexily walks over to him. And you're like, I literally wrote gross in all caps because that exists between people. It's so gross, but it's sort of like, yeah, he can do whatever he wants as long as he, maintains my lifestyle. Yeah. And Fran's not into it. Fran is disappointed. Yeah. This is not the trip to Paris that she thought. She, to her credit, thought she was going to go get to know this man. She was trying not to be, biased. Right.
She was wowed by the private jet and the trip to Paris, but I think she thought the payoff to that was also going to be we'll get to spend some time together, and we'll get to really know each other. And he is, in this scene, very very cleverly and quickly establishes, like, he's not really interested in that. Like, nor is her friend's marriage anything like that. Like, these are really, really old rich men who want, like, a young chick to, like, spend the rest of their time with.
Yes.
And if you can hang long enough, you get, like, left in the wind.
Yes. In fact, at one point, Kathy even says, let them work. Every minute they're working is another million they're making. So they said that, I thought it was funny that even though they're like all sitting several feet apart on a private jet, we're supposed to think that that conversation is somehow private between Fran.
I mean, that's like, that's always like TV logic. It's also like it's like the 3 people in a, 4 people in a room together and 2 people turn to each other and go, boy, this guy's crazy. And you're like, that guy's 2 feet away from you. How did you not hear that?
Yes. Well, but so then this leads to this scene. There is a scene that I loved, which is, it's clearly like the next day. They've flown back from Paris and now it's just Fran, or maybe it's a couple days later, but it's Fran and Val in the kitchen. And Fran's kind of just rehashing. And she's like, Val, like, I'm going to have to break up with Theo. And Val's like, oh my God, why? His man has literally like showered her with expensive gifts so far. Mm-hmm. And there was this exchange where Fran goes, she's like, I'm just window dressing to him. I'm Vanna White. And Val's like, but you love Vanna White. And Fran goes, I know, but I don't want to be her. And she's like, I want to buy the vows. I want to solve the puzzle. And I loved that. Yeah, and it was such a great sentiment, and Val goes, "Oh, Fran, you should write that down." But it's she's basically saying like I want to be an active participant in my relationship, and this is when then as if that wasn't already I think a great enough moment, we get this scene that we were talking about earlier, which was a great parallel to I think it was a mid-season season 1 episode where, and the one that I'm thinking is when Fran says something like I want a man who values my opinion. And then, Mr. Sheffield sauntered in and was like, Miss Fine, I need your opinion. So now we have this episode that, chronologically aired almost a year later. And we're kind of getting this again where Fran's like, she's like, oh, Val, like, I want a guy who cares what I think. And like, on cue, Mr. Sheffield pops his head in and is like, Miss Fine, what do you think? Yeah. He's like, what do you think about this?
Scenes like this before. I mean, we've gotten these scenes before on the show where she's like, I just want this. And then Mr. Sheffield shows up and gives her exactly that. And she's completely oblivious to the fact that the thing she's just described is literally what Mr. Sheffield is doing.
Yes. And specifically in this scene, he's like, I got those concert tickets for Maggie, but now I'm wondering if I should let her go unchaperoned. And Fran just, she's just very expertly goes, get a couple of seats a few rows behind. We'll go. We'll make sure they don't get into trouble. And he's like, oh, of course. What would I do without you? And then he pops out again. She's like, Val, I need a guy who needs me. And then we get an extension of what just happened. We get like a cherry on top of that exchange because then we see the next scene is Fran and Mr. Sheffield actually at this rock concert and
Stone Temple Pilots concert.
Stone Temple.
They played like TV generic rock music underneath, and it made me very upset. I was like, that's not Stone Temple Pilots. Come on, stop.
Well,
I was excited. I thought because they name dropped and we were going to get like a cool STP cameo, but
wow, you even have an abbrev for them.
That's what they're called.
STP?
Yeah, Stone Temple Pilots.
Man, there's a whole universe that I don't know anything about.
There's a whole nomenclature you're not familiar with.
But so we don't actually see the concert, but what we see is Fran and Mr. Sheffield, they like rush out into the lobby area of this concert because it's so loud that they can hardly stand it. And they're basically like commiserating on how like, they're like, that wasn't music. It was so loud. And then they end up getting, Mr. Sheffield ends up buying them a soda and a hot dog and they sort of sit on the curb commiserating. And Fran says, they start talking about this Theo situation because she's, since broken up with him. And she's just like, I need a guy. I need a partner who I can share things with. And no sooner does she say that, does Mr. Sheffield hand her the soda. And she's like, oh, thanks. And he's like, oh, you're absolutely right. Relationships are about give and take. And then no sooner does he say that, does she hand him the hot dog. And he's like, oh, thanks. And they're just very comfortably just sharing this, meal together while sitting on a curb. And it's that, you don't see what's right under your nose theme between the two of them. And it's very sweet. And at first when I was watch this, I was like kind of annoyed that it was so similar to that scene. I even looked up the episode. It was season 1, episode 12. And I was like, oh, they literally did like a beat for beat redo of that scene, like how repetitive. But then I remembered, no. There was like a year that aired between these episodes and we're essentially binging. So this would have felt like just a taste of this, after a year.
Exactly. This would have been a season 2, early season 2 reminder that like, hey, these two are meant for each other. And that is what the show is building towards. And I mean, strap in, because I have a feeling that this is going to drag out for, the next 2 seasons at least. Because I don't think they even get together officially until like season 4 or season 5.
I think season 5. Yeah, I think it's season 5, and they get married season 6 or something. But then no sooner do they have that little beat, than do they actually see Theo. They see him like on the sidewalk, and they're like, "Oh my god!" Like, look, and then
this
they
was the
see
most unbelievable part of the episode to me.
Oh, that he would be at this concert.
Why
right?
is Theo taking? They reveal that his date is now Cece, and she's wearing the earrings that he had bought Fran, but Fran reveals that she kept the necklace, which is a funny beat. But I was like, why would Cece and this old man be at a Stone Temple Pilots concert?
I know. I would have thought it was more believable if they just saw them walking down the street together and they just happened to be walking. But it was made clear that they were at the concert because they were wearing some sort of VIP pass. But who knows? We don't know. But just the little joke is that, well, Fran obviously would never compromise herself enough to maintain a relationship with a guy because he's rich, but Cece absolutely would. And then the little button was just, it's just a resolution of the C plot where, Fran is taking Gracie to that sleepover, and
Gracie, she's finally gotten over the bear thing. She's like, teaching her like tricks to like, okay, if you miss the bear, like, just take a deep breath, whatever. And it's like this big moment of sort of growth, for Gracie. And then they open the door to the slumber party, and there are approximately 40 girls inside, and they all have teddy bears.
Yeah, and they're all like, "Hi, Gracie," as they're waving their bears in the air. And Gracie just has this moment of abject horror on her face, and then Fran is like, "Oh, we'll be right back."
Yeah, Gracie hyperventilates and steps backwards out of the room.
What I thought was funny though was like this was a very minor C plot. Like we hardly spend any time with it, but the audience reaction, which I don't know if it was put in post, it was almost like as extreme as when like Ross sleeps with that woman while he's on a break with Rachel. It was like, oh, and I was like, is this a bigger moment than I am realizing? And I'm like, no, I think they just made a weird choice.
It's like a funny payoff to the bit, but like I also clocked that and was like, no way did the audience gasp.
Yes, it was like big, huge reveal, but for a very low stakes thing. But so that was the whole episode. Yeah, we had that like, kind of interesting perspective of these like, these women from Queens who are marrying up, the luncheonettes, the wealthy men that just want these young girls or young women rather, and don't care about like their partners. Right. And it was, and then it had that really great emotional payoff. So and that was it, I feel like.
Well, then I guess that means it's time for
segments.
And now, segments.
So, segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
We can move on to our segments.
And now, segments.
Segments with Shawn and Toria.
All right, Toria, take us into it. What's up first?
All right, favorite moments and lines.
Well, you stole mine. I even specifically noted, I won't say it here, I'll save it for later. And then you were like, we definitely have to mention that this funny line happened. So I have no lines. It was I wouldn't be caught. Cece says, I wouldn't be caught dead in that dress. And then Niles says, you'd have to be dead for 6 months to even fit in that dress.
Oh, I clocked that you blew past it and just thought you had forgotten to mention it.
No, I was trying to save it.
I didn't pick up what you were putting down.
Otherwise, I feel like this is this part of the segment is just redundant.
It's like Chris Farley being like, remember when?
Yeah, exactly.
Remember
Like, hey, remember 5 minutes ago when we said that this line was a great line? Well, here's that line.
That was a great line. And I loved the moment when Cece is dragging Fran around that party trying to keep her mouth shut. I loved their chemistry as comedic actresses in that moment. I really like this line where when Kathy, Val, and Fran are in the kitchen together during the luncheonette. And Kathy said something like, well, like, what are you doing here? And Fran goes, oh, I'm the nanny. And Kathy goes, oh. And Fran's like, well, what? And she's like, well, it's just back in high school. People thought you were really going places. And Fran goes, well, I showed them, which really made me laugh. Like a great response, a great yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, just
yeah. It was a good self-deprecating way to deflate that sort of undercutty comment from Kathy.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of a rude comment, oh, we thought you were going places.
Mm-hmm.
I liked Fran saying, she's talking to Maxwell and they're talking about music and she goes, meanwhile, explain to me Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. The girl with colitis goes by. Ugh, that's very distasteful. And Maxwell goes, it's the girl with kaleidoscope eyes, Miss Fine. And then her response was, oh, leave it to Flushing to turn a beautiful image into a bowel dysfunction.
Yes. And that's also my line. I have that line too. The girl with colitis goes by.
Yeah, that got a laugh. The girl with colitis.
Now I don't know if I can ever hear that song
without hearing. Yeah, the girl with colitis goes by. And you want to talk about fun coming up with fake band names? How about coming up with that pun? Must have been a good hour and a half wasted.
Well, I wonder if somebody really thought that in the writer's room and they just brought it up and they wrote that in. There was another quick little moment where when Fran is telling Val that she's going to be breaking up with Theo, and Val asks her why, and she's like, well, because all we did on that date was I flew on a private jet, I shopped, and then I ate in a 5-star restaurant and went home. That was it. And Val completely seriously, not sarcastically, goes, drop dead. And it was just this moment of her eyes almost went vacant when she said it. It wasn't, it just, her visceral reaction to that's your problem with that date, and to the jealousy the flash of jealousy really made me laugh.
There's also a funny exchange with Val and Fran where they're talking about the trip, and she says something and Val goes, I thought the Eiffel Tower leaned, thinking of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And Fran goes, Val, that's Big Ben.
Yes. And that rang very true to me, to friendships where there's these friendships where it's there's kind of an alpha person and there's a beta person. And it's the alpha person will say stuff like that. They'll correct, they're implicitly trusted with information, even if it's completely, they're just as in the dark as the other person. I like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's classic Dumb and Dumber. It's like they're both idiots, but for some reason, one of them's the leader. Yes.
And then if you're good on lines and moments, we can move on to trivia.
Let's move on to trivia. What do you got?
Alrighty. So, this episode, as we discussed, really reminds us that Fran and Mr. Sheffield are meant for each other, maybe even destined for each other. But interestingly enough, and we know that they get together eventually, they get married and have children.
It would have been funny if you were but interestingly enough, I am meant for no one. So let's discuss.
Will I die alone? Let us know. Interestingly enough, in an interview with Fran and Peter Mark Jacobson in 2018 for an Australian outlet, Fran Drescher revealed that she doesn't think she never wanted Fran and Mr. Sheffield to get married within the universe of the show. In this interview, she said, I would have, it's kind of known, it's famously known that the studio pressured them to make that happen. And they basically said, if you want to get renewed for a season 6, you need to push that romance and get them engaged and married. And so in the interview, Fran Drescher said, I would have written a great season finale, but not changed the dynamic of the relationship between Fran and Maxwell. So the show would have ended with her being the nanny of the kids and him being her boss, but the two of them sharing a certain attraction that never got realized. Honestly, I would have preferred not to wrap the show up the way it was at all. That was dictated by the network. It really wasn't our choice. And
Wow.
when I read that, I thought to myself,
you should have saved this for the series finale.
well,
No, I'm just kidding.
great. Well, but the thing is, when I first read that, I thought, wow, I wonder if it's because in Fran's mind, she didn't think they were really destined to be together, or if she just had such a fundamental understanding of like the workings of the plot engine of a show that she knew that it would ruin the show. And no sooner did I think that I like look into another interview or a later part of that interview where she said, once the sexual tension is gone and she's the wife, there goes the series. So if we were to ever do a reboot, it wouldn't be because of the money. It would be because we had cracked how to make that work 20 years later. So I was so impressed that they had the self-restraint and the like intuition or to go, this show works because of that tension. And the second that they get together, there's no more show.
I mean,
and
it's why Ross and Rachel didn't get together for 150 years. I mean, once you break the sexual tension bubble, that kills your show. Like it kills, like, because that's what people are tuning in for every week. And then once it happens and they're a couple, and it's like, okay, there's no stakes, there's no drama, they're just a couple. Or you have to manufacture, which is the problem writers often run into, which is like, okay, we want these people to be together. Now they are together, but now we have to make the relationship dysfunctional because people being happily together just is it's boring to watch. If there's no conflict, it's boring.
I basically had to stop watching The Office because once Pam and Jim, the American Office, I should say, once Pam and Jim got together and they then had to give them like really dark marital troubles, I was like, I can't. Like, I don't want to see this. This is not the world I want to tune into for 30 minutes.
That's a great example because it's like the writers make Jim and Pam a couple, but then they have to buy back the tension. And the only way to buy back that tension is like you said, you have to do like horrific couples drama. And it's like, but then that breaks the thing altogether because then it's like, oh, well, you have to make someone's got to be the bad guy. Well, and a lot of times it was Jim was an asshole. Like
now the will they won't they is will they get divorced, which is a very different will they won't they. And it's not what I want. This is not the escapism I'm looking for. But yeah, so, it just goes to show that, Fran and Peter Mark Jacobson, they really knew what they were doing. They really understood what makes these things work. And they really did the them getting together under duress, which we knew, which we'd read about before. But it was interesting to just hear her like officially put that on the record.
Well, and be sure to listen to the series finale of this podcast where we will give you trivia about the pilot episode. So that's a little teaser for that. Stay tuned.
Yeah, I'm going to put a note because that'll be like a year and a half. I'll remember it. I'll put in my note. I actually should make a notes document. That's not a bad idea.
You should.
So our Yiddish for the episode. So there was no Yiddish, but I looked up Yiddish. What I looked up was something relevant, which is Alter Neuef means dirty old man.
Ooh, Alter Neuef. I love it. Alter Neuef. It means dirty old man. You dirty old man. You Alter Neuef. You.
Alter Neuef.
I love it. I love it.
You gotta.
Why did I never learn that as a kid? Because it meant there were no dirty old men around for my grandma to call
that. And then for the Fran or the Cece, I think we're both the Frans. I don't think either of us have the capacity to marry for money or marry for something that's not real.
I think you're wrong.
I know I don't.
And also, I enjoy a Stone Temple Pilots concert, so I will be the Cece this week.
Oh, well, no, I was saying that you were the Fran, too. I said we were both the Frans.
No, I'm saying I think you're wrong. I think I could totally see myself marrying only for money in a reality where Elizabeth didn't, where I never met Elizabeth.
Is that true? Really?
Yeah, why not? Who cares?
Because
a lot of money? How much money? Like if some 68-year-old like billionaires was like, "You're hilarious, darling. I want to make you my betrothed," I would be like, "Go."
Okay, so if Mrs. Howell,
Yes, this is how from Gilligan's Island. But wait. Is she off the island? Is the real important question there.
I sometimes think that I could. Like sometimes I'm like, no, I could. But then in real life, I get so uncomfortable and so skeeved out, even spending time with someone romantically who I don't really like, that I know I couldn't. Like that's
true.
It makes my gut feel bad.
No, you're right. I don't think if I was really faced with it, I don't know that I could, like really, really do that. But it's fun to imagine a world in which you're like, oh, you just want me to like sit in a room and like be around, and then also like I'm just gonna get all this someday. Like I could probably kill enough time playing video games.
You just want rich parents.
I just want rich parents. So mom, dad, if you're listening, get it together. Let's go.
Okay.
Time.
So Shawn and I both agree we would marry for money if we were also in love.
Yeah, if we were in love, we would totally marry for money. Yes, if I was in love with someone and also they were rich, I wouldn't be like, I love you deeply, but like, what's up with all this money? I'd be like, run a money bath, darling.
So, all right, well, I think that's the episode. I feel like we definitely babbled a long time.
It's interesting. Look, you got a real deep look into our psyches. They're clearly broken. Mine's a landscape of both humor and serious pain.
Landmine. Not a landmine, a minefield.
Minefield. What did I say? A landscape? It's a landscape too. It's like got horses in it.
Miniature horses.
Yeah.
Horses of all sizes.
Little tiny baby horses. And they have hats. Okay. Oh my God. All right. Well, thank you. Oh boy. Tell us if we babble too much at Mr. Chef Pod on Instagram and on Twitter, or you can find us personally. You can find me at Shawn Wrights on Twitter and tell me to close my yap. And Toria, where can people find you?
Toria Sheffy on Instagram, 2 Fs. And I just wanted to say again, thank you so much to our subscribers. I was looking at our podcast stats and stuff again, and I can't believe there are people who are giving their actual hard-earned money to support this. And I am shocked, and I'm so grateful. So thank you guys.
We now have more than one person who is giving us money every month. So thank you to those people. It's pretty great. Whoever they may be in this world. We appreciate it dearly.
All right. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye forever. Just kidding. We'll see you next week. Bye.
The Flashing Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.